And the big core question of Islamophobia and discussion around it is that the definitions are AWOL. There's no stringent definitions, which means you cannot leverage them to impact behavior. And that's the big problem here, I think. Now, the last one is Islamophobia to tasweer. This is important because the whole point of tasweer is to be able to understand it when you see it. And this is the big problem. This is the $1 million question in Islamophobia Awareness Month, which is defining what Islamophobia is, because there's two things that lead to it being effective and being able to be leveraged, which is you have to be able to conceive of it, you have to have a conceptual framing of it, you have to be able to see it, understand it, and be able to explain it to other people. And then once you've done that, you can go to a court of law and say, this is Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hate, or this is not. That's affirmation. So the big thing in classical logic is definitions, how they're created, and the purpose. The whole purpose of having a word which is a definition is that then you can say that definition either exists or it doesn't exist. The car is in the garage. You have to understand what a car is, you have to understand what a garage is, then you have to understand, is the car in the garage? If somebody says newspaper editors are Islamophobic, you have to understand and conceptualize what newspaper editors are as a grouping, as a universal. And then you have to understand what Islamophobia is and Islamophobic is. And then you have to make the affirmation or not, or whether that is the case, the statement is true. And that is Islamic mantiq, and it's based on peripatetic Aristotelian philosophy. But essentially it's basic logic, basic sense. And the big core question of Islamophobia and discussion around it is that the definitions are AWOL. There's no stringent definitions, which means you cannot leverage them to impact behavior. And that's the big problem here, I think. And also the other questions are, if you want to understand what Islamophobia is, ask Muslims who are at this receiving end of it. I could go through personal examples and so on, but I'll just go to the facts. 48% of Muslims polled by the BBC Radio 4 said that prejudice against Islam makes it difficult to be a Muslim. Prejudice against Islam, I'm just going to repeat that again because you have to understand what they're saying. Prejudice against Islam, religion, makes it difficult to be a Muslim in this country. Religion. So there's this whole move now to define Islamophobia as race, and then they muddle it up by saying, well, it's cultural racism, and then you go into these kind of nuanced discussions in sociology about what cultural racism is, in which case you basically might as well annex and demote every single other categorization of otherness, because everything is in some ways cultural, and you go into a quagmire of nonsense at that point. How do the people that inflict anti-Muslim hatred against Muslims feel about what they're doing? It's about the religion, and this is the same thing. There's a report done in the UK just about 10 years ago, just less than 10 years actually, in which they reported that more than half of Britons, 56%, now regard Islam, religion, rites, habits, practice, the religion generally as distinct to Islamic extremists, as a threat to the UK. Now, where does that come from? It comes from that whole thing I've been talking about, the historical narrative, the othering. If you don't understand that, you will say, well, it's cultural racism. It's not.